We tend to remember the story of Nicholas II and Alexandra Feodorovna as one of the great, tragic romances of the 20th century. For years, he sought her hand, and when he finally received her consent, his happiness seemed absolute. It is easy to assume that his devotion was always singular, yet historical archives preserve a different, less publicized chapter of his life. Long before he married Alexandra, the future emperor found room in his heart for another woman. Her name was Mathilde Kschessinska. She wasn't a princess, but few women in the empire could claim to hold such sway over its most powerful men. She became one of Carl Fabergé's most important clients, amassing a jewelry collection that could rival those of European royal courts. In fact, whispers in St. Petersburg suggested she possessed treasures that even the Empress might have envied. But perhaps the most striking part of her story is not how she acquired these treasures, but what happened to them. They are the subject of a mystery that hunters are still trying to solve today. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. Before we fully immerse ourselves in this story, I have a question for you. Had you ever heard the name Mathilde Kschessinska before today? Please do let me know in the comments. I am genuinely curious to see how familiar her name is to you. To be honest, I only recently dove deep into her biography myself, although in Russia she is quite a famous and controversial figure. Her life has been the subject of television documentaries and even a major feature film released in 2017 titled simply Matilda. And, naturally, the puzzle of her missing treasures continues to spark debates to this day. So, as I began collecting materials and uncovering the layers of her life, I knew I simply had to share the story of this imperial ballerina with you. Her story begins on August 31st, 1872, in Ligovo near St. Petersburg. Matilda was the youngest child in a family where dance wasn't just a profession, it was an inheritance. Her father, Felix Kschessinski, was a celebrated Polish dancer, famous for his spirited mazurkas, and her mother, Julia, was a former ballerina herself. So for Matilda, the stage was a second home from the very start. Yet, looking at her early years, she did not necessarily have the natural advantages of her contemporaries. She didn't possess the breathtaking classical beauty or the ethereal, almost floating lightness that defined the other stars of the imperial ballet. Matilda was different. She was petite, dark-haired, with a waist tightly cinched in a corset and the strong, muscular legs of a true athlete. But what she lacked in fragility, she made up for with something else entirely. She possessed an inexhaustible energy and an undeniable chic that seemed to eclipse everyone else in the room. She was incredibly feminine and knew the power of her own charm. She had wonderful teeth, something she was clearly proud of, as she constantly demonstrated them in a radiant smile. Beyond her appearance, she had innate practicality, a will of iron, and fantastic capacity for work. It was a potent combination. Her fate was sealed on a single evening in the spring of 1890. It was the graduation performance of the Imperial Theatre School. By tradition, the Tsar and his family attended these events. Alexander III considered supporting the ballet a matter of state importance. On that night, 17-year-old Matilda danced a pas de deux. After the performance, at the celebratory supper, something unexpected happened. The emperor asked to be introduced to her. According to Matilda's memoirs, Alexander III looked at her and said, "Be the glory and adornment of our ballet." But then he did something that would change the course of her life forever. He seated the young graduate between himself and his heir, the 21-year-old Tsarovich Nicholas. With a twinkle in his eye, the emperor added a playful warning. "Just don't flirt too much." Of course, they did exactly the opposite. Although Nicholas's diary entry from that night was rather dry, noting only that he had a good supper with the students, later entries reveal a different story. He began to attend her performances with increasing frequency. By the summer of 1890, when Matilda was performing at the Wooden Theatre in Krasnoye Selo, where the guards officers were stationed, their romance began to bloom. Nicholas wrote in his diary, "Kschessinska II positively likes me very much." It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow burn. He would visit her at her parents' home, sometimes bringing his cousins along for propriety. They drank champagne, laughed, and talked. But by the winter of 1892, the relationship had deepened. Nicholas rented a secluded two-story mansion for her on Angliaski Prospect. It was a place where they could be alone, away from the prying eyes of the court. It was during this period of intense affection that the first significant jewel appeared in her collection. Nicholas began bringing her presents, and though she initially tried to refuse them, she later wrote, "Seeing how it upset him, I accepted them." The very first of these was a gold bracelet adorned with a large sapphire and 2 diamonds. But what made it truly special wasn't the gems. It was what Matilda did with it. She personally had 2 dates engraved on the gold, 1890 to 1892, the year they met and the year he first visited her privately. The sapphire in this bracelet was the first of many. In time, she would become known as the Sapphire Prima, but it all started with this single, sentimental stone. However, there was a shadow hanging over their happiness. Even as he spent his evenings with Matilda, Nicholas's heart was torn. Since 1889, he had been nurturing a deep love for Princess Alex of Hesse. For years, this match seemed impossible. His parents were against it, and Alex herself refused to convert to Orthodoxy. This created a psychological paradox that Nicholas himself struggled to understand. In a remarkably candid diary entry, he wrote, "A very strange phenomenon I notice in myself. I never thought that 2 identical feelings, 2 loves, could coexist in the soul at the same time." He admitted that while he was with Matilda, he was simultaneously cherishing a 4-year-long hope of marrying Alex. Matilda knew about Alex. She knew she was the other woman in a triangle where the third point was a distant, almost unattainable princess. In her memoirs, she admits to feeling a sense of relief every time Nicholas's marriage plans seemed to stall. As long as Alex refused to convert, Nikki belonged to her. But before the inevitable end, they carved out a private world for themselves. In 1893, Nicholas settled Matilda and her sister in a secluded mansion. For the housewarming, he presented a rather spirited gift, 8 gold vodka cups encrusted with precious stones. However, history has its own momentum. In the spring of 1894, Alex accepted his proposal. The romance with Matilda had to end. They met for the last time on a highway outside St. Petersburg, she in her carriage, he on horseback. Nicholas promised to always watch over her and granted her a rare privilege, permission to continue addressing him familiarly in her letters, a sign of intimacy usually reserved only for family. There is a fascinating postscript to this breakup. That summer, Nicholas confessed everything to Alex, wanting no secrets between them. Alex forgave him, writing that she loved him even more for his honesty. She believed the past should remain in the past, cementing their bond with profound trust. But what about Matilda? She may have lost her Nikki, but she had gained something else, a reputation and a level of protection that no other dancer could dream of. And it is important to note that while Nicholas became a model family man, faithful to his Alex, he did not vanish from Matilda's life completely. In fact, he continued to send her magnificent gifts, pieces we will examine a little later in our story. But for her day-to-day protection, he passed her, quite literally, into the care of his cousin, Grand Duke Sergei Mikhailovich. The era of romantic sapphires was ending. The era of limitless diamonds was about to begin. When Nicholas married his Alex, many whispered that Matilda's star would fade. After all, the favorite had been replaced by a legitimate empress. But those who thought Matilda would disappear into the shadows didn't know her character. Nicholas had indeed passed her into the care of his cousin, Grand Duke Sergei Mikhailovich, to ensure she was protected. Yet, Matilda did not just survive the breakup, she thrived. She remained the absolute master of the stage, and more importantly, continued to mesmerize the men of the Romanov dynasty. She wasn't just a former flame of the Tsar, she became a sort of collective muse for the imperial family. Nothing illustrates this unique status better than a gift she received in the theatrical season of 1896 to 1897. It wasn't from one admirer, but a joint tribute from four. Grand Dukes Michael Nikolaevich, Vladimir Alexandrovich, Alexei Alexandrovich, and Pavel Alexandrovich came together to present her with a brooch in the form of a diamond-encrusted ring. It was a stunning piece, but the design was secondary to the symbolism. Set into the diamonds were 4 large sapphires, and on the case, a small plaque was attached, engraved with the 4 names of the Grand Dukes. It was a demonstrative, almost scandalous gesture. It broadcast to all of St. Petersburg society that this ballerina held the attention of 4 of the highest-ranking men in the empire simultaneously. No other actress of the era could boast such a formidable lineup of admirers. With this kind of backing, Matilda felt invincible. By 1900, she decided to test the limits of her influence. In the imperial theaters, a dancer had to serve for 20 years to be granted a benefit performance, a gala where the profits went to the artist. It was a rare honor. Matilda, however, had only served 10 years. She demanded a benefit early, and of course, she got it. But there was a matter of protocol. For such an occasion, the emperor traditionally sent a gift. Usually, this was a standard, somewhat boring item, a gold watch or a silver cigarette case. Matilda, fully aware of her standing, let it be known through Grand Duke Sergei that she expected something distinct. The result was a truly exceptional piece. On the day of her benefit, the director of the Imperial Theaters arrived at her dressing room with a small box. Inside lay a magnificent brooch in the form of a coiled diamond serpent, holding a large cabochon sapphire in its jaws. It was exquisite, but the message accompanying it was even more fascinating. Nicholas sent word that he had chosen this piece together with his wife, Empress Alexandra Feodorovna. They had selected a snake because, as the message went, it is the symbol of wisdom. I find myself wondering, was this a genuine compliment to a woman who had gracefully stepped aside? Or was it a subtle imperial hint? A reminder to be wise, to keep her secrets, and to never forget her place. Whatever the intent, Matilda pinned the brooch to her costume and danced. It was a public declaration that she was under the highest protection. While the Tsar provided protection from a distance, Grand Duke Sergei Mikhailovich offered something far more tangible. He became the central figure in her life, her devoted friend and, quite frankly, the man who ensured she wanted for nothing. Sergei didn't just give her jewelry, he gave her the materials to shape her own image. This is best illustrated by a gift that I think perfectly captures the scale of their relationship. One day, Sergei presented her with a box made of red mahogany, itself a work of art by Fabergé, rimmed in gold. But when she lifted the lid, she didn't find a finished necklace. Instead, the velvet was lined with a collection of loose yellow diamonds. They ranged from tiny, glittering accents to massive stones. Sergei's gesture was clear. Here are the materials. You create the masterpiece. Matilda took these stones straight to Fabergé. From this dazzling raw material, the legendary jeweler created a magnificent brooch for her. But amidst this blinding luxury, there were smaller treasures that tell us more about their intimacy than any diamond could. Matilda and Sergei belonged to a small circle of friends who jokingly called themselves the Potato Club. In honor of this, Sergei gave her a whimsical gold pendant in the shape of a potato. He also gave her a simple medallion containing a 10-ruble coin minted in 1869, the year of his birth. By 1900, Matilda seemed to have it all: the adoration of the public, the protection of the emperor, and the limitless generosity of Grand Duke Sergei. But the heart, as they say, wants what it wants. Matilda was still young, and while she respected Sergei immensely, she craved passion. Destiny intervened on the very same night of her benefit performance. Yes, the same night she received the Diamond Serpent from the Tsar. At the celebratory dinner, she was seated next to Grand Duke Andrei Vladimirovich. He was Nicholas II's cousin, 6 years younger than Matilda, handsome and undeniably charming. The spark was instant, and just like that, Matilda's life became a complicated, fascinating geometry. She did not leave Sergei. Instead, she entered into a relationship with Andrei while maintaining her bond with Sergei. What makes this arrangement truly remarkable is that, according to the sources, both Grand Dukes were fully aware of the situation. They knew they were sharing the affections of the same woman, and yet they seemingly made peace with it. This romance with Andrei would evolve into the defining attachment of her life. In 1902, Matilda gave birth to a son, Vladimir. While St. Petersburg society gossiped relentlessly about who the boy's father really was, it was Andrei who ultimately became her life partner. Their bond would survive the collapse of the empire, war, and exile. Years later in France, they would finally sanctify their union, becoming husband and wife. If Sergei brought the new wealth of diamonds to her collection, Andrei brought something else entirely: history. He was a Romanov with a taste for the exquisite, and his gifts often carried the heavy, glamorous scent of blue blood. This shift in her collection is perfectly captured by a gift she received later, to mark the 10th anniversary of their relationship. It was a pendant featuring 2 enormous cabochon sapphires framed in diamonds. They were breathtaking stones, but their value went far beyond their carat weight. Fabergé, who had brokered the sale, whispered a secret to Matilda. These were not just any gems. They had come from the famous parure of Duchess Zinaida of Leuchtenberg. To own gems that had once adorned a duchess, pieces with a lineage tracing back through the European aristocracy, elevated Matilda's jewelry box to a royal standard. She wasn't just a collector of pretty things anymore. She was a custodian of history. Andrei understood that for Matilda, jewelry was also a professional tool. For her role in the ballet The Pharaoh's Daughter, he commissioned a piece that was nothing short of spectacular: a diamond bandeau tiara set with 6 large sapphires. Fabergé created the design based on sketches for her costume. When she stepped onto the stage wearing it, she wasn't wearing a prop of glass and paste like the other dancers. She was wearing a fortune. It was a power move. It signaled to the audience, to her rivals, and to the imperial box that the woman dancing before them was in a league of her own. But Andrei's generosity wasn't limited to gems. He gave her a gift that would eventually become her lifeline. He bought her a stunning property on the French Riviera in Cap d'Aille. It was named Villa Alam, a nickname derived from his own name. I want you to remember this name, Villa Alam. While the sapphires dazzled the eye, it was this house that would play a crucial, tragic role in the final act of her life. Having secured the devotion of 2 Grand Dukes, Matilda's attitude toward her collection began to change. She evolved from a grateful recipient into a demanding connoisseur. She was a true socialite who followed the trends of Art Nouveau and modern design, and she wasn't shy about getting what she wanted. She developed a habit of ordering her gifts. She would visit Fabergé or other jewelers, spot a novelty she liked, and then coquettishly hint to her admirers that she would be so very happy to see that specific piece in her collection. One such piece, which she acquired as early as 1895, perfectly illustrates her bold taste. It was a heavy gold brooch in the shape of a rhinoceros beetle. The beetle had a carapace entirely encrusted with diamonds and a glowing ruby. It was a conversation starter, a piece of art. She didn't save this diamond-encrusted beetle for balls or galas. She would pin it to her peignoir while relaxing at home. She didn't wait for permission or for an occasion. She took what she wanted, and she wore it exactly how she pleased. By the turn of the century, she had become the undisputed queen of the St. Petersburg social scene, and she curated a look that was instantly recognizable. If you look at almost any photograph of Kschessinska from this golden era, you will notice 2 pieces of jewelry appear again and again. They became her visual signature. The first is a spectacular platinum choker formed of large, interwoven rings encrusted with diamonds. It was a bold, graphic piece, surprisingly modern for its time. While she sometimes styled it against a dark velvet band to create contrast, she most often wore it on its own, letting the icy brilliance of the platinum rest directly against her skin. Interestingly, this piece appears in photographs from her early years. We do not know its exact story, whether it was a gift from an ardent admirer or a personal commission, but it became her constant companion. Whatever its origin, she adored it. It became so iconic to her image that when the film Matilda was produced in 2017, the costume designers recreated this exact choker to visually define her character. The second key element of her style was a necklace of diamond bows created by Fabergé. This was a masterpiece of versatility. Matilda didn't just wear it around her neck, she treated it like a construction kit. She would detach the diamond bows and pin them to her bodice, or even fasten them to her headwear. There is a wonderful photograph of her with her son, Vladimir, where she is wearing a velvet Kokoshnik-style headdress, and pinned right to the front is this very necklace. By 1911, Matilda had spent 20 years on the imperial stage. To mark this milestone, a special gala was arranged for the 13th of February. The entire imperial family was in attendance: the emperor, both empresses, and the Grand Dukes. For such a significant anniversary, the Tsar's gift had to be exceptional, and it was. During the first intermission, the director of the Imperial Theaters presented her with a diamond eagle of an elongated shape, suspended on a platinum chain. Hanging from the eagle was a magnificent pink sapphire framed in diamonds. Through Grand Duke Sergei, Nicholas II sent a query. Would she wear his gift for her performance that very night? Of course, Matilda obliged. She danced the pas de deux from Paquita with the imperial eagle resting on her chest. It was a triumph. But sometimes, this absolute obsession with diamonds blinded her to reality. Matilda had reached a point where she felt the rules simply didn't apply to her. And this hubris led to one of the most famous scandals in the history of the Russian ballet. It happened during a performance where Matilda was cast in the role of a poor peasant girl, a beggar. The costume was designed to look tattered and modest, befitting the character. But Mathilde Kschessinska refused to step onto the stage without her jewels. She walked out to perform the role of a penniless girl while wearing her heavy diamond earrings and a pearl necklace worth a fortune. To the audience, it was dazzling. To the administration, it was a slap in the face of artistic integrity. The director of the Imperial Theaters at the time was Prince Volkonsky, a man of principle who believed that art should come before ego. He was furious. He slapped Matilda with a fine for altering her costume and breaking theater regulations. Any other dancer would have paid the fine and apologized. Matilda did neither. She went straight to the top, to the Tsar. She complained about the insult, and the machinery of imperial favoritism began to turn. The result was brutal. The fine was rescinded, and Prince Volkonsky, a respected man doing his job, was forced to resign. But among the sparkling diamonds and royal sapphires, there is one item in Matilda's biography that stands entirely apart. This is a story that has been whispered about for a century. It is the legend of the Golden Comb. It begins with the famous Russian poet and explorer Nikolai Gumilev. During an expedition to the remote White Sea in the Russian north, Gumilev allegedly uncovered an ancient tomb. Inside, he found an artifact of striking archaic beauty, a comb made of pure, massive gold, decorated with the figure of a girl surrounded by dolphins. Matilda, who had a sharp eye for the unique, bought the comb from him immediately. It was said that she cherished it above almost everything else, believing it was not just an ornament, but a powerful talisman. As long as she kept it close, she believed her incredible luck would hold. The reputation of this object was so potent that, according to family lore, a delegation of Mormons once approached Kschessinska, placing a signed blank check on her table. They were willing to pay any price to possess the artifact, believing it held ancient significance. Matilda simply refused. She would not part with her luck for any amount of money. Whether it was the power of the comb or simply her own survival instinct, Matilda's good fortune did seem supernatural for a long time. But by 1917, the world was changing so violently that even the strongest talisman could not stop the tide of history. In February 1917, the world Matilda knew collapsed. She was warned of the coming coup just days in advance. Rumor has it, before even the Tsar knew the full extent of the danger. She realized she had to run. But what do you do when your wealth isn't just money in a bank, but a physical empire of gold, silver, and gemstones. This is where the story turns into a true detective mystery. We know she couldn't take it all. She packed a small satchel with her most beloved, portable pieces, likely the Fabergé items and the sentimental gifts. But the rest? The scale of what was left behind is staggering. According to Matilda's great-grandson, Constantine Sevenard, who has spent years investigating family documents, the stash consisted of about 40 crates, and according to family lore, one crate was filled entirely with diamonds. Where did they go? Matilda's mansion in St. Petersburg was seized by the Bolsheviks almost immediately. Lenin himself famously made speeches from her balcony. The revolutionaries tore the place apart. They tapped the walls, lifted the floorboards, and interrogated the servants. Her maid, terrified, revealed some smaller hiding places in the house, but the main hoard, the 40 crates, was never found. There are two main theories regarding the location. The first suggests the crates were buried in the garden of her city mansion, but the second, and perhaps more plausible theory, points to her dacha in Strelna near the Constantine Palace. Grand Duke Sergei, a master of artillery and fortification, would have known exactly how to construct a secure, waterproof underground cache. In fact, it appears he succeeded. Before his arrest, he reportedly managed to get a message to Matilda confirming that the matter was settled. The treasure was safe. But Sergei himself was not. He never managed to escape Russia. He was executed by the Bolsheviks, taking the secret of the exact coordinates to his grave. Because of this, the location remains a mystery. Over the years, there have been several attempts to find the hoard, some involving descendants, others shrouded in murky details and controversy. Yet, despite the legends and the excavations, the earth has kept its secret. To this day, the 40 crates have never been found. Matilda managed to escape south with Grand Duke Andrei and their son. But the Sapphire Prima, who once commanded the stage in tiaras, was gone. In her place was a refugee trying to buy a ticket to safety. They eventually settled in France, at the Villa Alam on the Riviera, the magnificent home Andrei had given her in happier times. But Matilda's relationship with money had always been complicated. She had a passion for the roulette wheel. In a cruel twist of irony, her favorite number to bet on was 17, the very number of the year that had cost her everything. She eventually lost the villa to her gambling debts. But this is where we see the true steel in Matilda's character. Most people, having lost an empire, a fortune, and a home, would have broken. Matilda simply went to work. She moved to Paris and opened a ballet school. She didn't shy away from her past. She taught the next generation of dancers with the same rigor she had applied to herself. She outlived the empire, she outlived her rivals, and she outlived the men who loved her. Mathilde Kschessinska died in 1971, just a few months shy of her 100th birthday. She was buried in the Russian cemetery of Sainte-Geneviève-des-Bois, finally at rest beside her husband, Grand Duke Andrei, and their son. And so, the curtain falls on the story of Mathilde Kschessinska. It is the story of a woman who held the hearts of the Romanovs in her hands and wore the empire's finest diamonds, only to end her days giving ballet lessons in Paris. She lost her country and her 40 crates of treasure, but she gained the one thing she had always wanted. In exile, she finally married Grand Duke Andrei and received the title of princess. As for those 40 crates, who knows? Perhaps they are still there, waiting in the cold ground of St. Petersburg, a silent monument to a dazzling era that vanished overnight. If this story was as moving and fascinating to you as it was to me, please give this video a like. It really supports the channel. And do subscribe and hit the bell icon so we can uncover more secrets from royal vaults together. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. After all, jewels may be silent, but their stories never are, as long as we keep telling them.